Hey my girls, so today we are chatting about my top 10 tips for binge eating recovery. If you have been following my journey, then you know that I too struggled with binge eating disorder and it was the most exhausting 10 years of my life. If you haven't yet watched the video of my story with binge eating disorder, then I will leave the link in the description below. Before we get started, full disclaimer, I am not a doctor or a medical professional. All these tips are based on my own personal experience. If you are struggling with an eating disorder, then I would highly recommend seeking medical advice. With that being said, let's get into my top 10 tips for binge eating recovery. Tip number 1. It is much easier to prevent a binge from happening than trying to stop a binge in action. A lot of people who struggle with BED will understand this. When you're in a binge, it feels like an out-of-body experience where you are no longer in control of your actions. It's much easier to work on trying to prevent the urge from happening than trying to stop the binge once it's started. So the first step we need to start working on is reducing your urges to binge. Tip number 2, start fighting your urges to binge. Trust me, I know that this is easier said than done, and it certainly is very challenging to talk yourself out of acting on an urge. When an urge arises, try to employ the 4D rule. Delay, distract, determine, and decide. If you feel a binge urge coming, try your best to delay it. Distract yourself by going for a walk, reading a book, or phoning a friend. Determine, is this a binging urge or am I actually hungry? And then decide what steps you can take from there. Tip number 3, compensation is not helpful. When we overtrain or undereat to compensate for a binge, all we're doing is putting ourselves back into the dieting cycle. Try to separate your eating from your movement. We move our bodies to make us feel good and strong, and we eat to nourish our bodies. These two components need to work with each other and not against each other. Tip number 4, stop chasing perfection. You're not always going to have perfect days, and even while you're working on addressing your relationship with food, you are still going to binge. You can't undo years of binge eating in 1 week or 4 weeks or 8 weeks. It takes time. So when you give into an urge or when you have a binge, learn to forgive yourself, put it behind you, and move on. Improving your relationship with food doesn't mean that you have a perfect diet. The most perfect diet is the one that you can sustain in the long term. So stop trying to be perfect. If you have bad days, you brush them off and you move on. Number 5, meal times are important. Although meal times might not be important for someone who is focusing on fat loss, it is very important for someone who is trying to improve their relationship with food if they have BED. And this is because binge eaters strive off of routine and structure. Set up meal times for yourself. If there is one thing that is going to feed your urge to binge, it's going to be undereating. Give your meal times a level of importance. If you had a sick dog that had to have medication every 4 hours, you would do everything in your power to make sure that your dog got that medication. So you need to start prioritizing your health in the same way that you would for someone or something that you love. Eating enough will reduce your urges to binge. So make sure that you always have your meals or your snacks with you wherever you go. Tip number 6, have a massive dinner. Most binges tend to happen at night, even after a full day of good eating. So I want you to have a dinner that is so big that it literally makes you want to explode. For me, this is usually a burger with potato wedges or a protein paired with carbohydrates and veg. I want you to eat a dinner that gives your binging brain the same satisfaction that it would get from having a binge. Volume is key here, and I'm not saying that you should go out and have fast food or order in every night. A home-cooked meal is still best as it's not as hyper-palatable, but make sure that there is loads of volume. Tip number 7, enjoy the things that you want in non-impulsive moments. Now for me, this links back to number 6. After we are stuffed from a full-on dinner, we are going to eat some more. And this is really going to satisfy our binging brain. Something that has helped me plenty in my recovery process is every single night, without fail, I have a dessert. Whether that be an ice cream, a chocolate, a cupcake, or a handful of sweets, I make sure that my trigger food is always included in a planned environment. Making an impulsive decision to eat something is often when we are most vulnerable and more likely to fall into the trap of a binge. Remember, your binging brain is smart and it's going to try and catch you off guard sometimes. We are in a very vulnerable state when we are alone, and that's why I'm encouraging a big dinner as well as a dessert, because you're more than likely at that stage going to be with your partner or your family, which makes it very hard to binge eat because binge eaters don't typically binge in front of people. Tip number 8, give up the restrictive diets. I know that if you've been going around and around in the classic dieting cycle, then you are probably desperate to lose weight. But focusing on weight loss while you need to address your relationship with food is not going to be helpful. Make your number one priority to address your relationship with food. Yes, that does mean that weight loss might have to be on the back burner right now, but it also means that when you're actually at a point where you can focus on fat loss again, you will actually be able to sustain it because you won't be binging. Trust me when I say that this binging cycle can go on for years and years, so you really want to start working on getting a grip on it. Tip number 9, celebrate the small wins. Did you eat all of your meals today? That is fantastic. Did you go the full day without binging? That is great. Did you go to a social situation and not end up binging afterwards? That is a win. Focus on all of the victories that you make along the way. Tip number 10, and this is a really big one for me, and that is support. This might seem like a silly one, but it has been the most important component of my recovery. You need to start communicating with those around you and let them know that you're struggling. Tell them what your triggers are and what they can do to help. As an example, when I was in the pits with my ED, I spoke to my partner about it and said, this is what you need to look out for, and if I've had a binge, this is how you can recognize it. Am I constantly eating things that I usually wouldn't eat? Am I lethargic? Am I moody? And then I also communicated to him how he can help me if he does suspect that I've had a binge. For example, he shouldn't ask me what I binged on, because for me that's not going to be helpful. It's just going to make me feel guilty and I'm not even going to remember. So instead, now he says like, babe, can I cook dinner for us tonight? Or babe, let's go for a walk, or can we go to gym today? And by doing these things, he is helping me get back into my normal day-to-day routine to put the binge behind me and keep moving forward. So I know it might seem like a big step to talk to those around you, but trust me when I say that they play more of a role than you think they do. So start speaking up. I hope you guys enjoyed this video today. If you are struggling with an eating disorder, I am sending so much love your way. Keep persevering and don't give up. I will see you guys at the next video.